I'm really happy to be talking to Moonlake Lee. She's the founder and the director of Unlocking ADHD, which is a fabulous organization in Singapore. I'm so happy to get to talk to her tonight. Moonlake is another woman who was diagnosed later in life. We'll be finding out from her how that impacted her and whether or not she thought an earlier diagnosis would have made a difference. Moonlake, how did you first realize that you might have ADHD? And how old were you when you realized that?
I was diagnosed when I was 50 years old, which is not your usual age for someone to get diagnosed.
I was
And
49.
okay, we're not too far off. I was diagnosed because my daughter was diagnosed a year before me. As most parents would do when a child has a certain condition, they would try to find out more about it to see how they can support. Naturally, when I was reading about ADHD, I realized that there was a genetic link. We know it's not 100%, but it is strong enough that there is a good chance if a child has ADHD, perhaps one or two parents or a sibling might have it. That got me thinking. But at the age of 50, I thought I've made it thus far. Do I really need to go for a diagnosis at this stage in my life?
I know a lot of women feel that way. I always recommend it.
Yes, absolutely, me too. Oh, but at that time, I thought I don't really need to. But a year down the road, after her diagnosis, I was in a state of overwhelm. My ADHD symptoms, my presentation tends to be more predominantly hyperactive, impulsive. I tend to usually bite off more than I can chew, commit. There's never enough hours in a day to do what I need to do. At the point of desperation, when there were too many things going on in my life, I thought maybe I should go forward for a diagnosis.
You weren't thinking it would give you more hours in a day.
I actually was. I actually was. My confession. So I was hoping with the diagnosis and maybe with medication, I could unlock those precious few extra seconds or minutes. It
Uh,
didn't really end up that way, but that was the original intention.
when you look back on all the years before your diagnosis, do you see any signs or symptoms that it was there earlier and you just were missing it?
One of the things I've learned is that those with ADHD are sometimes known as being consistently inconsistent. Definitely, there were some traits like that. On the academic front, it would be like a seesaw. In moments of panic, I'll work really hard and get up there to the A class. Then after a while, I would slack off and I'll be going to the B class on the brink of going to the C class, and suddenly pull up my socks again. It was just really unstructured and always doing too much and also missing important things sometimes. I could never stay in a place too long in terms of my career. In terms of my studies, I kept accumulating degree after degree. It's not because I was so smart, honestly. It's more because I couldn't really figure out where I should be and what I should be doing. There were so many interesting things. Deep down, I always felt I wasn't enough. I wasn't
Ah,
smart enough. It's just trying to always keep improving and not really knowing where I should be going or what I should be doing. Yeah.
do you think you got anxiety from variation in your performance or were you striving for perfectionism? I hear that's a lot of issues that women develop when they don't know about their ADHD.
In my case, I don't have anxiety, like clinically, but I can be anxious. Definitely, I can be anxious. What drives me more is probably this misplaced sense of what is ideal. We think about an all rounder, someone that can do well in academics, in career, as a mom, in sports, or whatever. That's the ideal that I had somehow planted in me. Just
Uh-huh.
trying to live up to the should gave more stress.
Heard that women with ADHD seem to have more of those messages than the men with ADHD would because our culture puts so much more on us.
I think, yes, to some extent, is also the upbringing. It's not just the culture, but the
Uh,
family unit. In my case, I'm married to a very exceptional person who is excelling in almost every field that he goes into. That's the added pressure. I just want to point out that my daughter and myself, we both have ADHD, but we both have different types of presentation. My
mhm.
daughter is predominantly inattentive. That is so important in our relationship and as a parent to recognize and understand the wiring is different. What works for me wouldn't work for her. The way I interact with her or understand her should be really according to who she is.
I've talked to families where the son got diagnosed and the girl didn't because people weren't recognizing that there is more than one presentation. So it's good that you recognize that with your daughter, that things that would help you might not necessarily help her, even though you both have, quote, ADHD.
Yes, absolutely. The work that you're doing with the Inattentive ADHD Coalition is so important because most professionals think of ADHD as the hyperactive, impulsive kids bouncing off the walls, usually boys. But when it comes to girls, because of the inattentive, internalized kind of presentation, it doesn't always come out so obviously. That's where the overlooking happens. I did a video on women with ADHD, and the 3 women interviewed, myself included, one of them had inattentive ADHD that everyone thought was just stress.
Yes.
She couldn't get help until she was in the mid-30s. She had a tough life. The only reason why she stepped forward is because she didn't want girls to go down that road that she had traveled. If she
You're
could
right.
prevent that, then she was happy.
Do you think you were putting any strategies in place to deal with your challenges? Do you look back now and say, oh, that's why I was doing it that way? I was doing it differently than other people might have done it.
When I look back, I'm really grateful to my grandfather. He raised me when I was a child. My grandfather was such a particular guy. He taught me about timetables, to-do lists. He would record everything. He was just obsessive about recording. Like for his car, when he fills in the gas, he would actually have a little notebook where he writes what,
Oh,
the odometer reading. My grandmother had high blood pressure. He'll take a blood pressure reading every night and put it down on a notebook. I was raised like that. Now I realize it's called executive function. I have some executive function tools.
do you
Helped a
think that
lot.
had that helped with your memory problems to be writing things down?
I think so. My husband used to laugh at me prior to diagnosis, and even a few years after. I had this little book, a small one that can fit in a handbag. Every
Mhm.
day is filled with all my to-do lists. That kept
Well,
me on track.
I used to work at a job where I said that my notebook was my brain. If I
Absolutely.
lost that, I was absolutely lost. I
But
couldn't
now we have
function
Google
just off.
Calendar and Google Task, right? That's what I
Yeah.
use more now.
Uh-huh.
But
Yeah.
nothing beats that piece of paper for the daily priorities.
But you did pretty well in school. You can't think of any particular strategies, but you were learning some executive functions from your grandfather. You credit him with helping you with your ADHD before you really learned about it.
Yeah,
Um,
that's one more thing I did in law school that
yeah.
helped. With ADHD, sometimes you can't prioritize. You don't know what's important. Everything looks important to you.
Uh,
I remember that my law school notes, everything was in multicolor highlights. I remember memorizing just the colors. When I studied, I would walk around, I would pace around and say things aloud. Now
mm,
I realized what helped me was trying to use the different senses
yes.
to put things into working memories. I was writing something down, the act of writing or translating it, the act of walking around pacing, saying it out loud so I could hear it, even visually in terms of the different colors of the highlights. The only
Yeah.
thing missing that I learned was using scented highlighters or pens, right?
You got covered almost everything you could have covered. I talked to one woman, she used to go to a coffee shop to do her schoolwork because being in a chaotic, lively environment helped her to focus.
Absolutely. My daughter found the value of body doubling. It was to study with someone. She couldn't study at home. And she couldn't study in her apartment or her bedroom. She had to go to a cafe or to a library.
For me, I'm the opposite. I couldn't go to my office and do work. I would come home and get the important things done here where it's quiet.
Identify with you on that one. I actually prefer to work from home, but I do have a team, so I do have to go in.
Are there any websites or resources you recommend to people that have ADHD?
For those who are listening in from Asia and particularly Southeast Asia, I would recommend the Unlocking ADHD website.
I recommend it even I'm not in Asia.
Thank you so much. Our YouTube library of videos with over 50 on ADHD on different aspects. But beyond that, our starter kit, which is very practical
Yes,
roadmap on
yes,
ADHD. I really love Attitude.
me
It's my
too.
go-to for many things early on in my diagnosis, and especially when I was working with the younger folks. I found Jessica McCabe's How to ADHD very helpful. For those that are really into the research and the clinical evidence base, Dr. Russell Barkley is amazing. I like Edward Hallowell, Ned Hallowell. There are actually so many good ones. Peg Dawson with her work on smart
Yeah,
but scattered kids. There's so many gurus out there, and
right.
yourself included. What a beacon of inspiration, Cynthia, and congratulations on your book.
Oh, thank you. Do you know about the website ADH.org?
Yes, I think I've seen it. Yeah,
When I tell people that medication is the most effective treatment and they're doubtful, I send them there to look at the research. It's pretty significant that we know that of all the treatments, that's the most effective. If you had any advice to give a young girl that was just getting diagnosed, what kinds of things would you tell her?
to find out about ADHD so that she can understand it and not to worry alone. Seek support. She might not be comfortable going to parents. I hope she has a good relationship with them. That should be the first place. But if not, find peers, find a counselor, find someone that can lend a listening ear. It's so important to know you're not alone on this journey. My kids who are emerging adults now, they went through their own rough patches. I asked them, what would you tell a girl that's a bit younger than you now? They said they would tell that girl to wait, it gets better. Don't give up.
What I say to people is with the diagnosis, sometimes you feel like it's a setback or there's grieving, but I tell people that it's a diagnosis where you only get better.
Absolutely. I like the way Ned Hallowell describes the ADHD wiring as a Ferrari engine with bicycle brakes because it's very strength based. What I share with parents is look for the strengths, look for
Oh,
that
yes.
interest area because the wiring is very interest and novelty based. Look for the interest areas because those can turn out to be the strength. When we get those small wins, that's where we build the resilience, the confidence to stand up in tough times because the tough times will come.
Yes. I just want to say I have a different model than Dr. Hallowell. I say I have a Ferrari engine with faulty spark plugs. I think that describes the inattentive type more than the combined type. Those of us that have trouble getting started.
Absolutely. One is to get the engine started, one is actually slow down.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
know?
One needs the brakes, one needs the ignition.
Thank you for that.
So
Absolutely
often
right.
we're talking about the hyperactive. I can feel hyperactive for short periods of time, but to me, the real hyperactive can be that way all day long.
Absolutely like me. Okay. So
Yeah.
I definitely get it. I think it's a fantastic analogy and something to add to the way we share
Yeah.
about ADHD so that people can really see it in all the different layers because it's a very layered condition, very complex.
I give a presentation how individualized it is because there's 18 symptoms, but people can have as few as 5 or 6 of those symptoms. Some could have all 18. Some can have symptoms more severe than others. And you throw in what their family life is like, what their community is like, what their innate talents and abilities are like. And there's so many comorbidities they could have and
Absolutely.
health problems, which so different. We're all diverse.
Absolutely. It's not an easy condition to diagnose. There are so
Well,
many nuances, but that doesn't mean that we should stop trying. But that shows you
I
how
guess
complex.
I'm not totally comfortable with that. My hope is that we're going to start getting girls diagnosed by age 8. You have to start thinking if you look for them, you will find them. We
I
haven't
agree.
been trained to look. That's my thing. How do we get more people to know what to look for? One doctor told me he thinks part of the problem is that the school year starts and the teachers look at the students and say, oh, this one's going to need help, that one's going to need help. But the people with ADD, especially the girls, they can look really good the first
Yep.
month of school. The teachers should go back later and look again. Look and see which children are not tuned into their assignments, which children are looking out the window, which turn in their paper without the backside completed. All those small little things, it's not one major thing. It's a complex of behaviors, but if you become alert to them, at least your antennae are going up and you're saying, maybe we ought to explore.
In China, they're training some of the teachers to spot signs early. There can be early intervention. One thing that actually would be interesting would be to help parents figure out what are the early signs. Because parents are with the kids, right? They can observe. When it comes to an earlier diagnosis, the parents' input is important, right?
Yes and no. Sometimes parents, it might be their first girl or it might be their only child. They don't know normal childhood development that
Correct. So
well.
it's
And so
actually
they're
education.
relying
Yeah.
on that's where I feel once they get in school, the teacher seeing them in a group, seeing them in a structured situation all day long, that is a helpful piece of information. Parents, sometimes I think we end up cueing our children without realizing it. Do you know what I mean? We get in the habit of saying, turn out the lights and get your pajamas and brush your teeth instead of thinking, this child is 6 years old. They should be able to do their bedtime routine by themselves.
Yeah. I think two aspects of what you just said. The first one is in ADHD families, it's actually normalized internally. So they may not realize that is not the way it should be. That's one aspect. The other aspect as a parent is our expectations or our understanding of the biology. We know that the prefrontal cortex development For those with ADHD, it is delayed, about 30% behind. It could be 3 to 8 years behind. In Singapore, we have a huge exam, the primary school leaving exam at age 12, which determines where they go for middle school. Our dear friends who have ADHD and other special education needs may, on an executive function age level, be about 9 years old at best. So we're
Right.
actually setting them up to fail because they can't meet those expectations of a neurotypical 12-year-old. They're always getting in trouble. They haven't got the support needed, the scaffolding, to be realistic about taking the child as he or she is and not according to what their peers are doing.
I don't know the way around that. There's so much pressure to start children at school at a certain age, although they've found out that the children who have a birthday in the fall do less well than the children who have a birthday in the spring. The older you are, it gives you an advantage.
The other thing I've also learned as a parent is the usefulness of a gap year. In Asia, we try to rush things and do things earlier and faster.
You get so proud of your child who's young and who's able to do this or that.
Trust me, sometimes the gap year is imposed on you. If you
Ah,
don't, if you're not
wow.
self-aware enough to take it in a way that you can control, it gets put upon you. It happened in my life. In America or in other countries, having a gap year after high school is not uncommon. In Asia, it is not common. The expectation is you keep up with everyone else. If there's an option to delay a year, not many parents would choose that option. That doesn't do the child any good because there's a lot more pressure and the brains are not fully there yet. In my own situation, when I was younger, if we didn't take that gap year in a very intentional way, it gets thrust upon us.
I
So
don't understand when you say it's thrown on to you.
I was too immature to know about needing more time to mature. I didn't meet the deadline to get into school. And I had one extra year
Oh,
of doing nothing and not having any friends around. But that helped me to do better when I went back to school. The same thing for my daughter. The
well,
maturity wasn't there. She ended up repeating. It's
it
thrust
shows
upon
up
you.
in a different way. Yeah.
Absolutely. A lot of things we need to be aware of.
Do you want to disclose what you do for your ADHD treatment, personal
Sure.
treatment?
Happy to. We always say it's so important to walk the talk. It's just not theory. I do take my medication. I try to take it regularly to be consistent. That's the first thing. Secondly, I started therapy about 2 years ago. My therapist happens to be an ADHD coach. The last couple of years, I've had a tremendous amount of strain and stress without a therapist that I could count on and feel comfortable with, who could guide me. I don't think I'll be here speaking to you today. I think that is so important to
Ah,
normalize therapy. Many of us in denial. I thought I didn't need it. But when I went through it, I just found how liberating and how important it can be. Beyond that, I try to incorporate lifestyle changes. That's why I run. I run to get away from the computer. I have a 3-liter water bottle with little markers on the time of the day to make sure that I hydrate. I had to resort to paying for a personal trainer to make me do weights twice a week. I have to send him photos of every single thing I eat because he wants to make sure that I'm eating the proper thing for my health. I have friends who message me every Saturday morning at 7 say, hey, are you up? We're going to run together. All these things is putting these structures in place. I use the timetabling, the blocking of time for meetings. I try not to have meetings in the other times to give myself time to breathe. Some days I just packed morning to night and I don't know where I am by the end of the day.
wow. I'm so lucky that I'm retired because my schedule has so much freedom and what you're living sounds awful.
I know. Honestly, I've been working 90-hour weeks for the last 3 years
Uh,
and it's not sustainable. So that's why I have to be more intentional than just
yeah.
complain about it, to actually put measures in place. That's what I'm trying to do now. All these are important because ultimately, as a woman, we're always the last when it comes to self-care. It's so important to understand that because we are the ones that hold everything together,
Right.
home, for our
Right.
kids, for ourselves. If I'm not around, I'm not in good health, how can we do the important thing that needs to be done? Is
Right.
remind myself about the big picture.
Do you think having ADHD has affected you with your friendships or with your family?
It definitely has. When I first launched Unlocking ADHD, I was interviewed on that regional documentary on women. And I couldn't figure what to talk about. I talked about my marriage without telling my husband ahead of time. I was like, oh no, touch wood, this year we're 32 years married. But it has been so many ups and downs in our lives just because of the symptoms and
Ah,
his response to the symptoms. I've
mm,
realized more recently about the object permanence issue and working memory. Sometimes when people are not in front of you, they're out of mind. It's not
ah,
because you don't care any less for them, but it's just that we tend to deal with whatever's in front of our nose. We need to understand it ourselves and communicate it to those who matter to us. Otherwise, people think we don't love them, or they're just like leftovers, or lose. Be very sensitized to the impact on those around us.
It was a learning experience for you. How is it now that you have that knowledge? How does it change what you can do? One woman I talked like therapy helped her a lot with her family. She used to have explosive episodes of anger and she had to learn self management. She wasn't going around emoting all the time.
I don't have a major anger problem. I tend to be a bit more positive than not. But one thing I am improving on is really trying to slow down, put in the pauses. Yesterday, I received a message on my phone that triggered me, but not responding to it,
Ah,
sleeping on
ah,
it,
ah. Uh-huh.
putting in that pause. It is important to have that time to reflect or even check with some other people who are more neutral than me to see whether I'm reading the message properly. Rejection sensitive dysphoria.
Ah.
And my reading may be colored by so many different things
Mm,
from what was originally intended. Of
mm.
course, some people do have an issue with tone, which can trigger, but it's also to realize my own triggers. I'm scarred, but hopefully wiser. And I hope that the process and this journey of learning, even though it never ends, I hope it gets less painful as we progress.
Yeah.
It's important to be real about it too, so that people understand that everyone is a work in progress. The key is to keep going.
When you talk about the sensitivity, where I've been challenged is my language with other people because I can be very direct and even called blunt. Sometimes people with ADD have that too. We get hurt, but we also don't always talk in a way that is kind to other people.
Yeah, I think for myself is also to understand the importance of context. What I try and do now to give people context, because it's so easy to get misunderstood or misinterpreted.
Can you share any success stories or positive experiences you've had that came after you learned to manage your ADHD?
Getting in touch with my emotions. I've always thought I've been pretty even keeled, maybe a bit excitable, but pretty even keeled. We talked earlier about anxiety. I don't think I have clinical anxiety, but I can be anxious. As I looked into ADHD, and we know there's such a strong comorbidity with anxiety and depression. And we know that emotions can be contagious. So the importance of co-regulating emotions, and
Mm.
especially in close relationships, say family relationships, I've learned to be aware how my anxiousness could trigger more anxiousness in my family, like my daughter. She has learned to tell me, Mom, you're making me anxious. Then I can back off. Those are the give and take that's important. Since my diagnosis and my daughter having ADHD, there's a sense of we're in this together.
The benefit of it is you can share. You can share.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so important. I need to be owning it. She can see me owning it. I hope that she will do that too. One of the things I've learned too is all to do with tone. I never realized how important tone was. But for ADHD, we have this inner sensitivity to tone and delivery.
When you say that, my husband used to say, it's not what you say, it's how you say it.
Absolutely. Being very mindful about what we want to say, but if it's not said properly on the right context or the right time, it can be seen as a very unhelpful or negative thing to be resisted. We don't speak often enough about the ADHD symptoms that impair the relationships. We look a lot more at the underperformance side, whereas in school and work or life, but the relationship part is so important because at the end of the day, what do we have left? Is the relationships, is our loved ones, right? We need to be able to understand the importance of the emotions, the emotional regulation. That's one of my big learnings since my diagnosis.
If I can get in touch with my emotion and I label it and figure out why I'm experiencing it, that helps so much to make it go away. Once you can figure out why am I feeling anxious and you
Name it.
yeah, you name it. Yeah, that helps.
The other big learning is that it's so important to be able to talk about ADHD or having ADHD. Many people think that they're the only one that has it. They're suffering in silence or they feel stigmatized. Once you talk about it and becomes normalized, it's amazing how many people that you would meet once you say you have it or a family member has to say, oh, me too. Or I know someone with that. It is much more widespread than we think.
It's not
And that's
just
so
that.
important.
If you say that you have it, you realize it's not that big a deal. Other
Yeah.
people don't suddenly shun you or move away from you because you said you had ADHD. It's very freeing to not
absolutely.
be afraid to tell people you have ADHD. The more people that do it, the easier it is for all of us.
Absolutely. I do quite a few corporate talks in Singapore on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We say ADHD is an explanation, but not an excuse.
For me, that was always a conundrum because when I look in the dictionary, explanation and excuse have very similar definitions. Someone told me that how you're feeling inside when you say something. Are you taking responsibility or not? Your attitude
Yes.
or your tone is what makes the difference between it being an excuse or it being an explanation.
Absolutely. The key here is taking ownership, taking responsibility. It's not just saying I have ADHD. Yeah,
Forgive
it's
me, I am.
important to get acceptance, but it's important for us to move on because face it, if it's 5% or 10% of the population, we're still in the minority. We need to get along, right? It's important to equip ourselves with the knowledge and tools so that we can do that and have a better quality of life.
I'm torn when I read about people saying the world should learn to accept us as we are, or we need to learn to blend into the world. I think there's a
It's a
meeting in
mixture.
the middle. There's
Yeah,
a meeting
I
in the
think so.
middle.
I think so. We know that nothing is black and white, right? There's a lot of collaborating, compromise, but understanding.
What one man said that I really related to is that if you don't feel like you're forced to change, but you're choosing to change, that makes a big difference. When he started a business and he needed more social skills, he wanted to learn them. He had the motivation to do it instead of someone else telling him, you're a jerk and you better learn to shape up. That didn't motivate him. But once he needed to know it, then he was motivated.
Absolutely. It's like me and my weight, right? My husband says, you know what, you're putting on weight. I think you need to do something. I was like, oh my goodness, I don't feel like doing anything. I just want to push back. But deep down, I know it. I stand on the scale, I know it. Then I will find my own way. We want to do things our own way. There's a fierce sense of independence there.
Right. I don't like to be told what to do.
Yes. Some people don't understand that when you see an ADHD not doing the right thing, the tendency is to want to tell them what to do. But that is actually not the best way. There is
No.
something called collaborative problem solving. Hey, that's a situation here. It's not ideal for either of us. What can we do as a team? What do you think we can approach this and problem solve it together rather than you've got a problem and this is what you need to do about it?
I don't know. As you say that, I'm thinking how you and your husband could collaborate about your weight. I don't think there's some problems that you collaborate about.
But at least collaborate with me in the sense that he realizes there are things that nagging will not help.
Yes.
Sometimes the act of just not saying anything or leaving me alone already is a blessing.
That's a good step. If you've been married 35 years, I'm sure you've worked out some things. Do you think you have any strengths or unique qualities because of your ADHD?
I think we all do. That's why I started Unlocking ADHD. I believe that we're all diamonds waiting to be uncovered. One of the things I always recommend to our community is to do a strength finder test to see what are your top strengths. When we can do more in that area, we get in the zone and we get all those wins. For myself, I'm super persistent and resourceful. Ned Hallowell talked about the right kind of difficult. For us, that's important. Find out where that is to engage us, but to also know our wiring, know where it's not strong and where it's strong, and do more things in the area of strength. For me, it's the people, right? I get energized by meeting people. I'm curious and I'm learning stuff. Those are my zones of strength. I'm what they call an arranger. I can put different things and people together and make things happen, like mashups.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then work in that zone. But if you give me numbers, to give me standard operating procedures and manuals, my eyes glaze. I suck at it. So really understand where our strengths and where our challenges are, and then try to go towards the areas of strength, and then find someone to take care of the challenges.
What I highly recommend a book called Strength Finders 2.0. And when I have my strengths, and this is what you bring to a group that is your special contribution, it gives you so much confidence to shine because you have this affirmation that this is what you're good at. This is what you need to bring wherever you go. That was how I benefited a lot from knowing what my strengths were.
The Clifton Strength Finder, that's what I recommend, right? And it's so important because we're always coming at ourselves from a position of weakness.
Brenda Mahan talks about the wall of awful.
Oh,
And
yes.
I thought I didn't have one. And I started to think about it. Oh, yeah, I have all these things I won't attempt to do because I already decided I'm not good at them.
Exactly. We need to know what our strengths are
Mhm.
because that not only affirms us, but it makes us be able to thrive. We outperform when we are in our zone. It's so important to realize that.
Has having ADHD ever prevented you from realizing any of your dreams?
I do wish that we knew about it when I was younger. Some of the career decisions I made, for example, or the way I approached exams might have been better or different. But there's no point thinking about what could have been. It's more important to know that it's never too late. My uncle in the US got diagnosed at 80. I know a couple of people here in Singapore that got diagnosed in the 60s. It's never too late.
But I'm trying to encourage parents that early diagnosis is going.
Absolutely.
For me, I had aspirations, and then living a life with undiagnosed ADHD, I lost those aspirations. I don't want young girls to have dreams that they start thinking they can't achieve. I became a veterinarian because I worried I couldn't learn what I needed to do to be a physician or
Understand.
those
Yeah, I
kind of
agree.
things.
And that's why in Singapore now we are trying to look at it from a lifespan perspective. I'm on one of the task force to look at the
You know what?
preschooler age as well as adult. We are looking at prior to age 7 now.
You're a
We
leader
tend to
around the
diagnose.
world then, because the US, I thought, was always the leader in this area, but even the physicians I talk to here say, I don't feel comfortable diagnosing before age 7. So that's why we chose that we wanted the girls to get diagnosed by age 8.
Definitely early intervention is critical because we know that without that, the other comorbidities get worse. The anxiety, the self-esteem. If we can get it earlier, and those are the key
Yes.
learning years as well.
Yes.
We
Yeah.
can rewire many things, right?
Yeah.
So
The neuroplasticity is there the
Yep.
younger that you are. Is there any last thing that you wish people knew? Anything you want to leave to parents in thinking about a daughter that might have ADHD?
First of all, having a daughter is so precious, but we also know that is such a tough time towards the teen years. The most important thing is work on the relationship to give them that security, that base, that they feel accepted. I'm talking more and more about relationships. So much emotionality in ADHD, right? It's so important to have that core.
Moonlake, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
We believe all girls with ADHD should get a fair start in life by getting diagnosed by age 8. Visit us at www.findtheadhdgirls.org. Thank you.